Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are joining us from. I am Christine Svara. I'm the director of her project, and it is a pleasure to be part of Financial Inclusion Week and share what we have learned at Her Finance, our digital wages work that we've been doing for the last 6 to 7 years. Today's conversation really is a culmination of both the impact we've seen, but also the lessons we've learned as we've been implementing digital wages, particularly in the garment sector in Bangladesh, and then replicating and scaling that to Cambodia and to Egypt. We have with us, or I have with me today, a fantastic panel that you will be introduced to in a minute. I've got Ratana Sam, who's the manager for supplier sustainability at Gap Inc., Leora Claffer, who's an economist at the World Bank, and Amrita Islam, who's the Deputy Managing Director at Picard in Bangladesh, and Tohurul Hassan, the Manager of Digital Financial Services at A2I, Inspire to Innovate at the Government of Bangladesh. And my colleague Smitan Nimelita, who's the Her Project country representative in Bangladesh and who led the transition of the work to Egypt. So really excited to be with all of you today. As we go along, please do post questions for the panel in the question box on your screen. Before we go into the panel, first we're going to go to a video, the work we've been doing and hearing the story of Eti in Bangladesh, and then Smita is going to take us through an overview of the work that we have been doing across all three countries. But you'll hear first the story of Eti and seeing what cash wages versus digital wages look like in Bangladesh.
Currently, we pay salaries in cash. We have to deploy a lot of manpower to the process of cash disbursement. We always have a very tight production schedule, and losing half a day of production time is very difficult for us.
এতে অনেক কিছুতে ভয় থাকে, অনেক সময় দেখা যায় টাকা কম আসে, নইলে বেশি হয়, ছিঁড়া টাকাও থাকতে পারে, জাল টাকাও থাকতে পারে। আমি এখন খুব খুশি যে আমি এখন মোবাইলে বেতন পাওয়া শুরু করে দিয়েছি। আর সবচেয়ে বেশি খুশি যে আমি এখন মোবাইলে অনেক টাকা জমাইতে পারছি, এবং এই জমানো টাকা দিয়ে আমি আমার স্বামীকে কিছু কসমেটিকের ব্যবসা শুরু করতে পেরেছি। আমি এখন খুব খুশি, টাকাটা এখন খুব নিরাপদে আছে এবং আমি যখন খুশি তখন খরচ করতে পারছি।
All right, so yeah, so if you can go to the previous slide, then I can just quickly give intro and we can start. So yes, hello everyone. I'm Smita, as Krishna already introduced me, from our project, and I'm based in Bangladesh. So in the next 5 minutes, I'm going to talk about wage digitization's impact for business and for female workers, along with the persistent challenges that need to be addressed to make it work for women. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we have learned from employers in Bangladesh and in Egypt that digital wages supported them to increase their business efficiency. In Bangladesh, we worked at 70 factories and with 150,000 workers, and we found out that worker production time lost on payday fell by 78% following wage digitization, plus administrative time that factory managers spent processing, counting, disbursing, and auditing payroll each month fell by 59%. Following wage digitization. So it's a huge cost savings for the managers. Next slide, please. Actually, Ella, in the previous slide, sorry. So in Egypt, basically, workers from one large factory group, where more than 8,000 workers are getting paid through bank account, reported to have saved 3 minutes of production time per worker after wage digitization. Factory management reported that they could reduce 48% of their admin cost dedicated to prepare and disburse worker payment. In Cambodia, recent research found out that factory managers are very satisfied with the digital payroll system, and they could save actually a significant amount of hidden costs of cash. For example, a factory of 2,000 workers with 85% women reported saving $1,700 per month after wage digitization. So these are the very positive impacts for business. Now we are going to the next slide, which is what is the impact on the workers. So we have also learned from Bangladesh and Egypt that along with wage digitization, if you can ensure strong support for women through financial capability training, then female workers can save more, and in a secure way, it can help them to have a say on their income and make financial decisions jointly with family members. It can also increase their confidence in handling unexpected future expenses. In addition, in Egypt, 79% workers reported that just having a bank account helped them to deal with financial crisis imposed by COVID-19. In Cambodia, the research says that there is a huge opportunity for female workers to be benefited from wage digitization and financial capability training. Access to financial account is very low in Cambodia. Only 18% people have access to an account. Around 65% workers send money home, but only 10% use a financial channel, like a formal financial channel. Workers have high levels of indebtedness and lack of awareness on financial management as well. So her project recently started working at 5 factories in Cambodia, and so more learnings to be shared in the upcoming year, basically. So next slide, please. So, however, coming back to Bangladesh, now let's look at some big numbers and benefits here. There are at least 4,000 garment factories in Bangladesh, as we all know. Think about a scenario where access to digital wages is provided to all the female and male workers, along with an enabling ecosystem and financial capability training. Then what does it mean? So her project predicted that it means 4 million workers can be banked, of which 2.3 million are women. Workers will use digital channels for remittances, which means 190 million, 99 million US dollar to be sent each month as remittances through formal financial channels. Then 400,000 hours of production time will be saved each month on payday. To learn more actually about this, we encourage you to read our brand new report called Within Reach, How Wage Digitization that Works for Women Can Support Bangladesh's Economy in Future. So next slide, please. However, we already said a lot of positive impacts and benefits, but there are basically 4 main barriers that women face when it comes to get benefited from their accounts. So without addressing those barriers, wage digitization won't be really beneficial for women. So we all sort of are aware of the first 3 barriers related to access, financial capability, and uses. So I want to highlight the last but not the least one, which is related to control over their wages. So due to social norms, traditional gender roles and expectations, female workers are required to hand over salary to their husbands, who ultimately is the decision maker. And we have seen that women are hiding a part of their salary for their children's future to send to their parents or for her personal use. But when she gets paid digitally, it means more transparency, and she might not be able to keep that amount anymore. And it can also lead to unintended consequences. So we have to be aware of these challenges and act on it to make sure that it works for women. So we have actually published a gender report very recently, and we encourage you to read that to learn more. So that's actually all from my end. Now I'm handing it over to Christine for the panel discussion session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Smita. And to everyone listening in here today, Smita has just thrown a lot of data at you and mentioning a lot of different reports. You should be seeing links on in your chat boxes with links to reports, but I'll share those towards the end of today's conversation as well. So one of the big numbers that Smita was playing around with is this idea that what would happen if every single worker in the garment industry was receiving their wages as digital wages, which means 4 million people in Bangladesh will be receiving that. So if I start with a question for you, Toharul, during the first waves of COVID-19, the government of Bangladesh responded very rapidly by really expanding the way that it did digital payments and digital wages, thinking about those big what if numbers that Smita shared with us here. Can you tell us a bit about, well, I mean, in your view, can you keep up momentum as government of Bangladesh?
Thank you, Krishna. Yes, you have rightly pointed out like the government responses, rapid responses during COVID-19. And one of the major responses that government took is to support the vulnerable families, the 5 million poor households during the COVID-19, and the wages for the export-oriented garments. So I think if we can see some numbers like the adoption of digital payments during the pandemic. So the number of salary disbursement through mobile financial service account rise over 250% in July 2020 compared to April 2020. And this was majorly driven by the wage distribution of RMG worker. So another number is the number of G2B transactions through mobile financial service provider grew nearly 86% in the period from 184 million from January to March 2020 to 342 million in April to September 2020. And also the transaction in mobile financial service and also agent banking also increased. But it was not an easy story. Yeah, so when basically the government declared the packages to support those vulnerable groups. So the key challenges were to onboard this huge number of beneficiaries, almost I can say 4 million for garments worker, another 5 million for poor households, almost 9 million people enrollment in the digital system within 3 or 4 months. So it is impossible if we without COVID-19. I think this is the positive side I can say of the pandemic, that the adoption of digital payment is rapid. And it is not only during the COVID-19. If you see the government commitment, so after the pandemic, so like government took the initiatives or declared that every single social safety net payment, that means G2P payment, should be digitally. And after the last year, so from the beginning of this current year, 2021, so from in first 6 months, so we have covered almost 9 million social safety net beneficiaries in the digital system. So it is possible because of government commitment. So I think the momentum is going on. It is not stopped. And also I need to mention 4 government ensure for this digital payment. Number one is policy adoptions. So the policy of digital payment or the mandatory options. So it is the only option to pay any beneficiaries, whether it is social safety net or any other sector. So it is now like adapted and it is accepted, and also it is written. So every single payment should be made digitally. This is one. The second one is digital KYC. And the payment is possible because of the use of digital KYC by the mobile financial service provider as well as the bank. And also not only digital KYC, I also want to remember that Bangladesh Bank allow the mobile financial service provider to open the bank account with only their NID information. So it's just if a beneficiary has the NID number, so mobile financial service provider can use this number to open their bank account, and it is not 101, so it is a bulk enrollment in the mobile financial service system. So this is another major area. The third one is using the existing infrastructure. So like we use the NID database, a national NID database. Then the second one is the mobile number. So to verify whether the number is right or wrong, we also use the government employee database, pension database to check the duplicacy and to reduce the leakage to ensure the payment. And the fourth one is private-public partnership, because not only government but also the private sector also help government to achieve this. So I think the moment that we have started during the COVID and after the COVID, we always still we are following those principles and the policy, and it is, I think it is already we are like we are used to with digital payments. Our beneficiaries, our government ministries, we build their capacity and everyone now accepted. So now each and every government ministries, government organizations, they are talking about digital payments, they are talking about digital wages, they are talking about mobile financial service. The acceptance of mobile financial service in the government and private sector is remarkable. So I think we are keeping the momentum for future.
Thank you. Thank you, Tohurul. So Leora, Tohurul talks about a combination of factors to keep momentum, to keep momentum going, but also having a big event like COVID really spurring on, turning up the pace on that momentum. So looking at these big predictions and what if everyone that is currently paid in cash were paid digitally, what trends do you see for the future of wage digitization more broadly, so outside of Bangladesh?
So our work towards more inclusive, World Bank's work more broadly towards more inclusive access to digital financial services is supported by digital wage payments. So as was just discussed, during the pandemic, millions of women have added bank accounts to receive both wage payments, but also government transfer payments, agricultural payments, remittance payments have all shifted to digital. And I'll make sure we'll know a lot more in June when the 2021 Global Findex data is published. And so our work in Bangladesh also suggests that women are using their accounts to save and manage their risks, especially their end of month, to avoid end of month financial distress. But the challenge has always been how to encourage these women, these newly banked, to access and adopt a wider range of financial products. So including insurance, savings, appropriate credit. However, I want to mention just the additional risks of this rapid digitization, particularly among women with lower levels of financial capability, also lagging consumer protection provisions, and really we have been seeing some higher risks of fraud. So, for example, during COVID, a World Bank Cambridge Center for Alternative Finance survey asked regulators how they were responding to COVID-19. And the most common actions that were taken, including increased flexibility in eKYC, expanded use of digital ID, remote onboarding, increasing transaction limits, and suspending or reducing fees for digital payments. And these are all features that can help encourage wage digitization. And policies to support cybersecurity also garnered a significant attention. And so, I guess, remembering that the success of digital wage payments depends on this strong enabling environment that also builds women's trust in the financial system and gives them the confidence to use their accounts and both to save and to make payments.
Thanks, Dora. And bringing us back to kind of the present, Amrita, when you made the decision at Picard to adopt digital wages across your factories, can you tell us a bit about your motivation to do so, but also what's worked well, what hasn't worked so well, and Leora mentioned here the particular emphasis that is needed to really include and gain acceptance among women. So maybe you can say a bit about that as well.
Well, thank you, Christine, and hello to everyone. We actually went digital before the pandemic happened, and our thinking or the impetus behind it was to make transactions more safe, as we saw in Smita's video, and to make our payments more transparent and easily accessible. This acted as a boon for us come the pandemic because we had a lot of the groundwork already done for wage digitization. So one of the main challenges which we initially faced, which I discussed during the start of the pandemic, was the lack of digital payments made throughout Bangladesh. So what we used to see, what was a challenge for women was like they would get paid digitally, but then they would cash out immediately and have to hand over their wages to their respective male partners. However, over the pandemic, since like mobile financial services, the use of mobile financial services has become so commonplace and people are so much comfortable with this now, it has decreased quite a lot. So kind of looking at the bright side of the pandemic is it has, in terms of wages and in terms of control over their payments, it has actually given a lot of power back to our women workers because now with the opportunity to pay digitally for like their groceries or for their everyday stuff, they were able to keep their payments digital and keep them in their digital wallet, which was fantastic because this is something that we had to touch on a lot pre-pandemic because this was a big issue. Like now we work with mobile financial apps and their salaries get transferred onto their mobile wallets, but pre-pandemic it would go into their bank account and they would have to give away their bank card pins. And they had, it was as if it was a cash transaction. But now with the use and with the acceptance of mobile banking services, there has really been a step up in the game, which is in the right direction. I think one of the things for the future of digital wages would be to introduce saving services for women and to educate our women on the benefits of digital budgeting and on keeping their money digital because with economies such as Bangladesh and Cambodia, still a lot of transaction is done on cash. And whereas like if women are still able to keep their digital wallets, I think they would have like they have better control over their money. They would be encouraged if they were encouraged to save digitally and if they were encouraged to have financial services or saving services which they were able to access digitally, then it would be a more enriched sort of digital service that we're providing to them so far, and it would add to their experience.
Thank you, Amrita. So one of the things and specific motivations that Amrita talked about there for factories and factory owners in Bangladesh, it's a little bit different for you as a brand. And so Ratana, I want to come to you and just hear a bit about GAP has made some big commitments and have big targets around wage digitization. Tell us a bit about why it's so important to GAP and also how you support your suppliers to make the change to digital wages.
Well, thank you, Kristen, for raising this important question. I'm not expert in this field, but let me try to share some experience having been on this project. Well, receiving your wages digitally directly into your bank account is perhaps quite common to everyone here. However, it is much less common in some developing countries, and particularly for garment workers in Cambodia. So many workers in our supply chain have little knowledge of what it means to receive their wages digitally and how it would benefit them. To be able to address this and receive buy-in from our garment workers has required a lot of time, effort, commitment, and of course, inclusive strategies. On how important it is, yes, we have seen it be a success for buyers, suppliers, and of course, the workers. For buyers, digital transactions afford a greater level of transparency, enabling us to be more easily and effective and effectively ensure our suppliers are paying workers in accordance with local law and our code of conduct. And for suppliers, digital wages reduce administrative time and cost, as well as security risks associated with holding and distributing cash. And for workers, and particularly women workers, digital wage provides access to formal financial products and services, and importantly, savings account. This gives women workers greater control over their finances and enables them to save and invest more of their money, which has positive outcomes on the children as well. With around 80% of global government workforce made up of women, Gaping sees digital wages as a fundamental building block in our women's empowerment strategies. And on how does Gap support our suppliers to digitize wages and workers? Well, it has been critical to consider the specific nuances of each country regarding the banking sector, education levels, and perceptions around banking. In Cambodia, we started with a series of discussions with all factory managers to understand the challenges and opportunities to make it a shift. We also held cluster digital wage workshops for suppliers in which representatives from the factories that were already using digital wages were invited to share their practical experience and with those who just starting to explore digital wages. During these workshops, bank officials from local banks gave presentations about their payroll products. And of course, at factory level, we knew early on that dialogue was critical to get widespread buy-in. So we encouraged factories to discuss and switch to digital payments with union leaders and workers well before the transition happened. Factories leveraged bipartite committee to discuss the issues and generate support from employees. Additionally, financial literacy training was provided to those workers who were enrolled in PACE GAP's signature Women's Empowerment Program. Collaboration has been key to our success on digital wages in Cambodia and elsewhere. So we have worked closely with Better Factory Cambodia, suppliers, local banks, and other apparel brands, BSR, MasterCard, and Better Than Cash Alliance and NGOs who are working to promote wage digitalization in Cambodia. So these are efforts we have put in this project, and thank you. And I hope I answered your question.
Thanks, Ratana. I think one of the things you said is for GAP, it's really important to understand the nuances in each country. And Smita, coming to you, because obviously you've been very involved in the work in Bangladesh, but also part of setting it up both in Cambodia and Egypt. And I'm particularly interested in Egypt here. When transitioning from one country to another, what have you learned? How easy is it to replicate across countries?
Yes, so thank you, Christine, for the question. So actually, I mean, in our experience, there is a lot of similarities in the support that factory managers and workers require, which means that it was possible for us to adapt all of our materials that were already produced, for Bangladesh. So we could adapt the materials relatively easily. But also, like, many challenges were also sort of similar. So, however, it's important, like, for us, like, we don't make any assumptions. So that's why we conducted assessments in different, geographies, like in Cambodia as well, and also in Egypt to start with. So if we say, like, what we did in the assessments, we basically, to understand the financial landscape and opportunities for this wage digitization, along with understanding the financial needs and the gender barriers, etc., of female and male workers. So we did that assessment along with, with the support from our partners and a range of organizations, for example, brands, employers, managers, financial service providers, and local NGOs, of course. And we actually spend a lot of time with the garment workers themselves, both female and male workers, to hear directly sort of from them. For example, like during FGDs with female workers in Egypt, we could learn about the problems with the SIM card. So most of them don't have a registered SIM card in their name, and there were some issues with the, with the mobile money accounts as well, which is quite unique to Egypt. It's not, that issue was not in anywhere else. So then also, like, I had an opportunity to chat with a group of Bangladeshi garment workers actually that were working in that factory in Egypt, who at that time mentioned that they're not allowed to open a bank account or any account per se in that time. So, then we also found out that how complex it is to, to open a mobile financial account, for example, in Egypt. So, and it was relatively easier to open bank accounts, but it's not that easy because KYC requirement was, very strict, and workers with low literacy, they found it very hard to read the forms and also to meet the criteria, etc. So, and also trusting the FSPs was a problem in both Cambodia and in Egypt as well. So yeah, so we we found out a lot of similarities, but also some unique cases as well. And then we adapted based on the market. But yeah, our experience in Bangladesh definitely helped to build up those programs in other countries. Thank you.
Thanks, Smita. And looking to the future, Amrita, you started talking a bit about some changes that's already happened from when you made the first switch to digital wages. You talked about being able to make payments outside of the factory and not cashing out really quickly. So in your view, Amrita, what other change do you need to see? What else is needed in Bangladesh for both male and female workers to really benefit from digital wages?
Thank you, Christine. I think the big hurdle in Bangladesh has already been crossed. So I will kind of reiterate what I said. I think we need more widespread acceptance of digitized payments everywhere, because in Bangladesh, sort of the trust factor is already there. And, we just need the future of digital wages, if we are to see that per se in Bangladesh, would be that for us to focus on keeping the momentum, because, we might be reaching a saturation point. And big step forward would be, right now we have digitized wages in formal employment sectors, that is mainly export oriented sector. I think it is time for Bangladesh to look into our local sectors, and which is a big employer in Bangladesh of both male and female workers. So it is important to the future is to look into digitized wages in the informal employment and local sectors. That is what we should focus on.
Great. Amrita, I'm going to take that question and ask Toharul. Amrita is saying, let's look at both, let's look at other sectors, and let's look at informal sectors. And you've got a forthcoming digital roadmap coming up, Toharul. Tell us about how the government of Bangladesh will support the expansion into some of those sectors that Amrita is talking about there, and specific other sectors you have in mind.
Thank you. Actually, you know that this year is the year for like celebrating the Digital Bangladesh 2021. So basically, we are looking so what progress that we have made already. So we are conducting a country diagnostic regarding the progress of digital payments in our countries, and it is focused not only digital wages, but also we are covering other payment streams like G2P, P2G, B2C. So these types of payment stream. So besides that, we are also looking for futures, like which sector that we need to prioritize for digital payments. Obviously, wage is important for us. So primarily in the roadmap that currently we are developing with the support from Better Than Cash Alliance, so we are considering agriculture is the most important sector for future to introduce digital wages and digital payment. And also the health sector, MSME, and the retail e-commerce. So this sector and also the education. So this sector we have prioritized for our future plan, like beyond 2021, we will work in these sectors, necessary policy issues that we have to resolve. Probably for the sustainability of these digital payments, we need to look for new business model, and also the collaboration between industry owners, private sector as well as government. So we are looking these into our future roadmap for digital payments and digital wallets.
Thanks, Tohru. I'm going to come to you, Leo, and actually I should say to everyone listening in here, keep the questions coming in. They will be posted in a while. I'll be able to bring them to the panelists in just a minute. I want to pick up on other sectors, Leo, and I'm going to come to you. So some of the sectors that were mentioned here by both Tohru and Amrita. So Tohru speaks both about public sectors and private sectors, so both about education and agriculture, and Amrita as well mentioned opportunities to really scale digital payments in the informal sectors. What are you seeing in terms of big new thinking coming around in terms of really driving inclusive digital financial access across a number of different sectors?
So certainly during COVID, it's building a number of international agencies report that about 1 billion people received some form of COVID-related wage protection and social protection-related money transfers. A lot of that was in cash. But according to the World Bank database that's been tracking government responses to the pandemic, 71 countries had cash transfer programs in place, and about 58 governments were using digital payments to deliver these payments, often to people who were previously unbanked. And as you mentioned, the challenge now is how to encourage the people to use their account for more than just the transactional withdrawal purposes. So certainly I think a lot of it is around the consumer protection, building trust in the accounts. Remember, people are storing their savings. Rumors fly. If there's rumors or any concern that the money's not safe in the bank, that they won't be able to get access to the account, people will lose trust. And so it's really important for both private sector and government to work together, to ensure that agents are well governed, that agents aren't adding on any additional fees. In many countries, to ensure that there are women agents. Women often feel most comfortable interacting with women agents. In many countries, there aren't many. And that's the same with women for client-facing staff at banks. So, and then of course, there's also the angle which BSR and others are involved with. It's just encouraging women by educating women, not only before they get their accounts, but the ongoing support, so that they're able to use their accounts with confidence. Will encourage them to use their accounts.
Thanks, Laura. Sminta, maybe I'll pick up with you on this topic of trust and safety and making sure that your money is safe. And I, some of the things that Laura mentioned there about rumors flying. I'm wondering if you can just share a bit about your experience across different countries about what are the most persistent rumors or lack of trust that you hear from workers when you talk to them.
Actually, one most common thing is that I think already Laura probably covered is that like they won't get access to the money when they need that most. I mean, different countries has different historical background for that. In Egypt, there was an emergency situation from the government's end, and all of a sudden all banks were shut down, so no one could access their money. That's a history. I think it's 10 years back. It's a recent history, but it was only 10 or 12 years. Then in Cambodia, there are, different, we know like there are difficult historical backgrounds for that as well. Like people has an attitude like they need to spend more with credits, but less savings, in the account, because ultimately that money might not be there at one point. So there is no point of saving that money in the account. So rather I can add more in here. And in Bangladesh, I think it's not, in Bangladesh, same, I guess. It's like, I think for the emergency purposes, they want some cash in hand. It's not that they don't have trust on the accounts. They do trust the accounts. They have trust on bank accounts or MFS accounts, a bit less on MFS accounts actually, because of the fraud issues, the constant, fraud and those activities. There is a little bit, less trust, but people in general do trust. And we have a, strong MFI network. Microfinance, initiatives, institutions are working in the country for a long time, even before, before bank accounts or MFS accounts were, had access, were given access to the workers or any rural people. So, yeah, so it's different in different contexts, but yeah, that's sort of it. Thanks.
Great, thank you. So when I guess our experience over the last 6-7 years, when we kind of summarize what we see as the kind of key, and I think Tohru, you had 4 key areas for you when we think about what is the right combination. We think about it in terms of A, creating the access, B, creating the usage, and Amrita spoke a bit about being able to use your mobile money in many more different places being a really important thing. And then the last thing we think about is capability, and really making sure that financial capability building is gender intentional. But one other theme that I've heard from a number of you, I've heard it particularly from you, Ratana and Tohru. So I'll go to you, Ratana, first, and then maybe it'd be good to hear from you, Tohru, as well. One other theme that I've heard from both of you is the need for public-private partnerships and working with other partners to make this happen. So, Ratana, do you want to say a bit about the types of partnerships that you've been involved in from a GAP perspective on this? And then, Tohru, I think it'd be great to hear from you around the public-private partnerships that you're looking for.
Yeah, thank you. Honestly, there have been many challenges up to this point, being the first mover on wage digitization in Cambodia, with respect to both supply and demand for digital wages. So, on the supply side, not all banks in Cambodia offer payroll services to the government industry. So, those that do offer these services sometimes have limited geographic coverage, with factories scattered across the provinces. There are often no ATMs or branch offices that workers in our supply chain can conveniently access. And on the demand side, there are a number of issues as well. So workers are very used to receiving cash and are sometimes resistant to transition to digital wages. It has taken time to raise awareness and get buy-in from the workers. And in general, workers see digital wages as a high-touch payment method, which is complicated, uncomfortable, inconvenient, and scary sometimes. So the barriers are even higher for those workers who cannot read and write. According to the survey by the Ministry of Planning in 2013, about 15% of apparel workers in Cambodia are illiterate, and 30% demonstrate low literacy. So therefore, with limited knowledge of banking system and regulations, workers don't feel confident that they can trust that their banks will give them their money when they need it. This is, of course, one of the reasons that when the transition to digital wages first happens, many workers line up in front of ATM on payday to withdraw all their money from their account. So it's been quite challenges for us, and everyone in the field is facing on this process. Thank you. Christian, please unmute yourself.
Sorry, thanks. One of the things to talk about there is also partnerships between different parts of private sector. So the lack in Cambodia of a wide variety of financial service providers that you can work with. So the other piece you talk about is again this theme of trust. And I'm wondering, Tohru, if you could say a bit about both, if you could respond to both, the kind of public-private partnership that you see being important for you in Bangladesh, but also the role that you as a government agency has around building trust across everyone that needs to be involved in this space.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I think the partnership is important because if you see like the long pending issue for our country, especially for the digital wages, the cash out fee, I think there has been a lot of debates between financial service providers and the industry owners who will pay the cash out charge, whether it is by the workers or by the garments owners. So I think during the COVID, we have found that government came up with a idea where the government fixed the cash out rate, charges for the digital wages. And also after the pandemic, government also follow the same rules for the government payment also. And here basically the private sector like financial service providers and other entities, they are contributing for the cash out charge also. So government is contributing one part and the other part is coming from the mobile financial service provider. So this is an example how public and private sector can work together to design a new solution. So like if it was not possible, I think the digital payment was not possible during the pandemic. So and also for the literacy and when are thinking the financial ecosystem. So like I am paying digitally to the worker and then he or she needs to use this money like local grocery shop, the medicine shop, and others places. So obviously, the private sector, the farmer informer is very much important. So other than mobile financial service provider, obviously other financial service providers like bank, fintechs, organizations like non-government organizations like NGOs. So they create a huge role, especially for the awareness and the literacy of the rural people. So these types of partnerships are looking for. So if it is possible, like if we can work with the NGOs and the private sectors, obviously a lot of solutions we can solve easily for the betterment of the financial inclusion ecosystem.
Thanks, Tohrul. And I've got one question coming in here, which I think I'm going to ask you, Amrita, to respond to. The question is, how important are industry bodies in helping bring partners together and setting agreed standards for wage digitization? So thinking about industry bodies here.
Thank you, Christine. I think industry bodies play a huge role in this. To take the example of Bangladesh, like during the beginning, like there was definitely a push from the buyer's side, but then BGMEA also took on a very positive mandate, and it encouraged people, all of the member factories, to move to wage digitization. And on top of that, like also like when during COVID, when the government support was announced, it was, as Mr. Tohrul was saying, it was announced in cooperation with the BGMEA, which is the Garments Manufacturers and Exporters Association of Bangladesh. So, you know, everybody was on board. So, and I speak for the leather sector. So our association has always been a very strong advocate for digitizing wage payments across the board. And we have, like, you know, once we started rolling out the program of educating our member factories of the benefits of wage digitization, definitely the numbers went up and we could, you know, immediately see traction of it follow through. And, you know, the associations play a key role in influencing government policy as well, so that, you know, they're complementary to each other. So definitely they play a very big part, and they, the support from the manufacturing associations is definitely a plus point in sort of rolling out digitized wages in developing countries.
Great, thanks, Amrita. And as we're getting towards the end here, I want to ask just all the panelists, and in just a few sentences, if you, if there's anyone listening here who are just starting out on the wage digitization journey, what is the one piece of advice that you would give to someone just starting out? So, Smita, I'll start with you.
I think it's very important to hear what female workers are telling you from the beginning. Like maybe they're actually sharing with you their pressing points, but you're just not hearing it properly because you have to roll out a program and you have to hit milestones. And yeah, you just need to do that. But yeah, I think that won't escalate. If you hear that from the very beginning, incorporate it in your program design, which may be very strict to edit, but do edit that, and do reviews very frequently, etc. So I mean, hear them out from the very beginning. Otherwise, I think it won't be, you can't scale it up. So you can scale it up. I mean, it will be a forced scale up. So it's not going to be very beneficial for the clients. So thank you.
Thanks, Smita. So properly listen to workers, or you will get to potentially a full scale up. I heard in there a bit of advice for funders as well, to make sure that there is flexibility to change programs and design if workers are telling us something slightly different. But Tana, you next. What is the one piece of advice you would give to anyone else for you, someone sitting in another brand having to persuade their senior leaders as wage digitization is really important? What's your advice?
Well, I'm not different from Smita. This is really difficult. When we started this effort, Gap Inc. was the only brand implementing wage digitization in Cambodia. And since then, other organizations, including BSR, have also begun working in this space. If we could go back in time, we would have engaged like-minded players from the very start to explore ways to partner to drive this work forward on the ground collectively. And this is really what I wanted. So yeah, in short, thank you.
Thanks, Ratana. So collective action, getting industry together to partner on driving this forward. That's good advice for anyone else starting this out, perhaps in another country. Amrita, coming to you, what is the one piece of advice that you would give anyone else thinking about digitizing their payroll?
I would say don't get sidetracked or don't get scared by the sort of the scale of the task, which which we felt in the beginning. It felt like a monumental task which we needed to attack. But communication is key. The more you communicate, as Smita said, the more you listen to everyone and pay attention to the stories. And it's important to have a holistic picture and not to get, there will be hiccups in the initial stages. It is a change, it is a new change. And when you work with workers' salaries, it is a very sensitive area to work with. So definitely there is going to be resistance in the beginning. So it is how you incorporate and how you respond to that resistance that is what is key, and to have flexibility. So sort of speaking from a management perspective, like not to get bogged down with like the perfect plan for a wage rollout program. What is most important is that, the people that we're doing it for, they accept it with their hearts and minds. So that is the key objective.
Thanks, Amrita. That was a lot of advice in one sentence. Don't get scared. There are going to be hiccups along the way, and I think be prepared for resistance and making sure you continue to communicate to respond to that. I loved your sentence saying, "Pay attention to what you hear from workers. Pay attention to the stories that you hear." Leora, turning it to you, what would be your advice?
So I'd ask this community of buyers, sellers, financial service providers, workers, help us really build the evidence base on ways that digital wage payments can improve the financial well-being, especially of women. In Cambodia, for example, excuse me, which has one of the the highest MFI, borrowing rates in the world, we can only speculate the impact of wage digitization on borrowing and repayments. In markets where you mentioned Egypt, where workers are migrant workers, can we design the right products to encourage these women to keep their money electronic, to send money home to their families, but also to make payments to themselves in the form of savings. And also, Smita mentioned, it's really important to set up rigorous evaluations, to survey and listen to the workers, so we can best understand their challenges and help come up with solutions.
Thanks, Laura. Build the evidence base. Gosh, I so wish then when we started out that there was a bigger evidence base to be building off from. And I think for me, I'd certainly echo that evidence that is both what worked and what didn't work. What did you do that didn't quite work? Can we be better at sharing some of that, making sure that we share both the data and the stories, and not just stories from workers, but also stories from MFIs and from brands and from factories that your experience and all of the different details that you went through. So yes, continue to build. And can we build a joint evidence base? That would be really great, so we can all dip into it and learn from that. Toharo, finishing with you, what someone else sitting in a government agency looking at creating a big digital roadmap, what is your or making a big push from a government side? What's your advice? Someone else in your
I
shoes.
think, yeah, the main important factor that we need to consider for future is like creating the use cases of this digital payments. So otherwise, you can digitize overnight, but the sustainability of this like payments, so you can't ensure that. So then people may again return to the old systems, and it will be a one-way payment. So I am paying digitally, he or she is cashing out, and the money again flow manually. So what will be the use cases for this digital money? It is important to think from government side as well as from the partners also.
Great, thank you. Build the use cases so it's not just we're not seeing quick cash outs of everything that's happening. And I heard you say as well, let's not make this just an overnight thing. This is a continuous piece of work that requires efforts from everyone. Thank you, everyone. I want to just pull up, and I don't know who's got the slides. If you can pull up, I wanted to share, thinking about advice for everyone else. We have, as of this week, a whole raft of material sharing our learnings, including the things that didn't quite go the way that we had planned it out or the way that we had agreed it with the funder to start out with. So there's a bunch of different resources that are coming out today. So do have a look at the Her Project website to look at that. Lots of resources around financial capability build, including modules that you can take and use as you work. There's videos, animation, audio messages, and all of this in many different languages as well. There is also a series of wage digitization guides that come out, one for employers, so Amrita and her colleagues, one for financial service providers, one for global brands and buyers, so Ratana and others, but also one for financial inclusion practitioners thinking about how to make this properly gender intentional. And then, as Smita said earlier, we have a new report coming out today called Within Reach: How Digital Wages at Work for Women Can Support Bangladesh's Economic Future, and insights from the government sector in other countries as well. We also have with Leora a forthcoming report which should be out in the not too distant future, really looking at this from a Cambodia perspective. So it's a collaboration between us at Her Project and IFC World Bank group under the Better Work Partnership with ILO. So really looking at the potential business and developmental gains of digitizing the garment sector. So that Ratana is something for you and all of the different players in Cambodia to have a look at. In the last minute, I just want to thank my panelists for their great insights, for sharing your advice and your thoughts with everyone. I love the mix of optimism. We've overcome some hurdles, we made it work, and but also being realistic about this not being a journey to go on without expecting any bumps in the road. So thank you, everyone, and thanks for everyone who's listening to us today. Enjoy the rest of your financial inclusion week.